Hello everyone, welcome to the Sanskar EduTech channel. This is Dr. Rashmi Oza, currently Chair Professor of Chief Justice M.C. Chagla Chair in the Department of Law, University of Mumbai, and former Head of the Law Department and former Dean of Interdisciplinary Studies. At the very outset, I'm like to thank and I'm grateful to Dr. M.S. Kurade sir for having invited me to speak and express my views on human rights within Indian Constitution. Can we compare human rights with the Indian Constitution? Why are human rights so very important universally? And what do we mean exactly by human rights or Manav Adhikar? Are human rights defined anywhere, either within the Indian legislation or under the international conventions and treaties? Well, India has passed a legislation, the Protection of Human Rights Act of 1993, which in specific term defines human rights as four aspects of human being: right to life, right to liberty, right to equality, and right to dignity of an individual, guaranteed by the Indian Constitution and embodied in the international covenants, but enforceable by the courts in India. 1 month hereafter, 26th of January 2025 will mark the 75th year of the Indian Constitution, when the Indian Constitution was put in its place and it became operative. It's been more than 7 decades since the Indian Constitution has been in force. It's been more than 7 decades since India has achieved independence. It's been more than 7 decades since the UN General Assembly has adopted the Universal Declaration of Human Rights 1948. Today, introspecting that how independent, humane and dignified life do we live, I'm sure the answer lies in the daily news reports, whether on the TV news channels or in the various newspapers that we read. We are aware of the Russia-Ukraine war. We are aware of the major disasters taking place all across the globe. We are aware of the major incident that happened in the end of December 2012 and which shook the conscience of the entire universe, not just Indian nation but the entire universe, that led into the Criminal Law Amendment Act. We are aware of that there has been a recent incident of a trainee doctor, an intern doctor, who was raped, gang raped, and then later on murdered at R.G. Kar Hospital in Calcutta. We are aware of various such instances like international terrorism, international trafficking, communal conflicts, religious rivalries, attacks on minorities, human rights violations by man-made disasters, by wars, human rights violations by ministers, police personnel and those in power. All these are an apparent answer in itself. Often, I think almost every day we read in the newspaper about custodial that take place both against the under trial prisoners as well as the convicts who are in the prison as such. Why does this happen despite India being a party to number of and major international instruments as such? I think that's a matter which should force us to a very deep introspection, that जब इंडिया के अपने काफी सारे कानून है, and when India has ratified, signed and ratified majority of the international human rights instruments, why does this happen and what are the consequences? Are the victims adequately compensated? What care is being taken by the state machinery so far as the victims of these rights violations? What is the efficacy of the mechanisms which are set up to protect human rights? So I remember of an incident that had taken place ages back when the great Sikandar conquered and captivated King Puru. उन्होंने किंग पुरु को पकड़ के जेल के अंदर डाल दिया था एंड उन्होंने उनसे पूछा कि मैं तुम्हारे साथ किस प्रकार का व्यवहार करूं. At that point of time also very proudly did King Puru say, so what if I am imprisoned? Behave with me like a king only. I don't cease to be a king, I continue to be a king. Does the same position continue today? आज भी क्या वही परिस्थिति है जब मैं कस्टोडियल एट्रोसिटीज की बात कर रही हूँ? मोर ऑफन देन येस, the answer would be no. So when we call India as a civilized nation, what is the true test of civilization? Well, the quality of a nation civilization can largely be measured by the respect a nation state gives to its citizens towards protection and promotion of their human rights and the method it uses for enforcement of these rights. India is a party to majority of the international human rights instruments. Our free and independent judiciary has also played a very crucial role in interpreting the various legal provisions in the context of human rights. Within the Indian Constitution, the four broad compartments of the Indian Constitution, the preamble, Part 3 of the Constitution, Part 4 of the Constitution we term as the directive principles of state policy, and the fourth part is the fundamental duties. All these four compartments also express a commitment towards protection and promotion of human rights. Being a party to the majority of international instruments, let me tell you that though the Constitution, the drafting committee of the Constitution, the draftsmen of the Indian Constitution were highly inspired by the goal of international protection of human rights and international peace. Therefore, a close scrutiny of these two documents, one is the Universal Declaration of Human Rights 1948 and the other one is the Indian Constitution, which came into effect and was put in its place on the 26th of January 1950, reveals a lot of identity. Because the drafting committee, and I must at this juncture also point out that it has taken nearly 2 years, 11 months and approximately 18 days for drafting the Indian Constitution. So just as we have preamble within the Indian Constitution, there exists preamble within the Universal Declaration of Human Rights as well. And the preamble, one of the prominent recital is, whereas recognition of inherent dignity of equal and inalienable rights of all the human family is the foundation of justice, freedom and peace in the world. Justice, freedom and peace. Three things which is still a missing dimension in some or the other form. And the very first article of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights states that all human beings are born free and equal in dignity and rights. They are endowed with reasons and conscience and therefore should act towards one another in the spirit of brotherhood. One may wonder whether a declaration can be binding. The answer is no. A declaration cannot be binding, but nevertheless, Universal Declaration of Human Rights 1948 is a very, very forceful document and the pillar of entire international human rights law post 1945 when the UN was established and set up. Now, what is the similarity between the rights falling under the Universal Declaration of Human Rights and the Indian Constitution? There are two sets of rights within the UDHR. Those are termed as the civil and political rights and the economic, social and cultural rights. There are two set of rights within the Indian Constitution as well, which are termed as the fundamental rights and the rights which we term as the directive principles of state policy. The civil and political rights under the international terminology are almost the same as what we find under Fundamental Rights Part 3 of the Constitution within the Indian Constitution. The second set of rights, the economic, social and cultural rights, are almost the same as what we find in Part 4 of the Indian Constitution, that's the directive principles of the state policy. One set of rights are called as the negative rights or the liberty-oriented rights. The second set of rights are called as the positive rights or the security-oriented rights. One may wonder as to why is it that one set of rights are termed as the liberty-oriented rights? Why are they termed also as negative rights? The answer is it refrains a state from encroaching upon man's action, thereby demanding a state, you cannot do this, you cannot do this, you cannot do that, so that the rights of their individuals are not violated. Whereas the second set of rights are security-oriented rights, because it's thrusting an obligation on the state, do this, do this, do this for the welfare of your citizens as such. Most of us, specifically a student like me who is still a law student, is quite aware of this fact that the second set of rights within the Indian Constitution are not directly enforceable, though they are fundamental in governance of the state. So also under the international human rights law, the second set of rights are soft rights as such, because it's thrusting an obligation on the state, stating that realize these rights to the maximum available economic resources. Now I'm just enumerating of the rights which fall under the UDHR and which are termed as the civil and political rights. The most prominent one is the right to life, liberty and security of a person. There is a right against slavery and servitude. There is a right against torture and other cruel or inhuman, degrading treatment or punishment. There is a right against arbitrary arrest and detention. There is a right to fair trial, both civil and criminal. There is a right to be presumed innocent till held guilty by competent court of law. There is a freedom of speech, religion, movement, a right to live one country and return to your country of origin, and also seek asylum from persecution. I repeat the word persecution. It's not prosecution, it's persecution. This is when a person is under a well-founded fear of, damage towards one's life or personal liberty in one's own country of origin, and therefore is required to take refuge or shelter in another country. Giving you a simple example of Taslima Nazreen, a Bangladeshi citizen, but taking refuge in other nation states because she's under a well-founded fear of being persecuted, where there is a threat to her life as such in her own country of origin. Then there is protection of ethnic, linguistic and religious minority. There is a right to participate in government through freely chosen representative by conducting genuine or periodic elections. The second set of rights, as falling under the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, are right to social security, right to work, right to join union. There's protection from unemployment. There's a right to just, favorable and humane conditions of work. There's a right to rest, leisure, periodic holidays with pay. There's a right to social security in case of sickness, widowhood, disablement or any such factor which are beyond human control as such. There is a right to free and compulsory education, at least till elementary or fundamental level, which significantly within the Indian Constitution is now made a fundamental right in the year 2002, December 2002, by adding Article 21A within fundamental rights. The question whether this right is realized is yet a contentious question, because figures reveal that there are still many children who are deprived of primary or elementary education, at least till the elementary or fundamental level.